I had been feeling off for quite a while, but I never expected it to get this bad. One Tuesday afternoon, while at work, an intense pain hit me out of nowhere. It was so unbearable that I let out a shout right in the middle of the office. It felt like someone had pressed a scorching iron inside me. There was no way I could continue working, so I left and went straight to see Dr. Anderson, our family doctor for years. He ran some tests, and I tried to calm down while waiting for the results. When he finally called me into his office, I could tell something wasn't right. "Jake, I have to ask you a few personal questions," Dr. Anderson began. "These aren't easy, but it's required by law." I was confused. Why would the law come into play for something like this? The pain was bad, but I couldn't figure out what he was getting at. "Jake, you have an STD," he said gently. "It's treatable, but it's definitely an STD." His words hit me like a freight train. My mind was spinning, and I could barely register what he was saying after that. An STD? How was that possible? I'd been faithful to my wife, Emily, ever since we got married. I'd never even thought about straying. "Are you okay, Jake?" Dr. Anderson asked when I didn't respond. No, I wasn't okay. Not at all. "How could this happen?" I asked, my voice shaky. "I've never been with anyone else." Dr. Anderson looked at me sympathetically. "Who's been your sexual partner recently?" "Just my wife," I said, my stomach knotting up. I felt sick. Without warning, I threw up right there in his office. It was like my body already knew what my mind didn't want to accept. My wife had to be the one who gave me this STD. Emily had cheated on me. The realization crashed over me like a wave, and it was all I could do to stay standing. Dr. Anderson handed me a tissue and looked at me with concern. "I'm really sorry, Jake," he said. I thought, well, with all the traveling you do for work, I wasn't sure what to think. "So, what happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "You'll need to talk to your wife. She has to come in for treatment too," he said carefully. "We need to know who she's been with. If it's been more than one person, we'll need to reach out to them as well." "Why would you have to contact them?" I asked, still trying to process what was happening. "Because it's required by the CDC. Anyone she's been with needs to know they might be infected." I sat there, dumbfounded. The woman I'd loved for over a decade, the mother of my children, had betrayed me. And now I had to go home and confront her about it. I left Dr. Anderson's office in a haze, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. My entire life felt like it had just collapsed in a matter of minutes. Emily, my wife for the past 12 years, the mother of our 3 kids, had been unfaithful. How long had this been going on? And why? We had always seemed like one of those couples who'd make it, you know? We had plans, we had a future, or so I thought. When I got home earlier than usual that day, the house was quiet. Emily's car was gone, and the kids were still at school. I was alone with my thoughts, and all I could do was sit in the living room, staring into nothingness. I should have poured myself a drink, but the antibiotics I was on for the STD made that impossible. So, I sat there, going over every moment of the last few years in my head, trying to pinpoint where things went wrong. Had I missed the signs? Was I just blind? Hours passed, and finally, I heard the front door open. Emily's laughter filled the entryway. For a brief second, I thought everything might be normal again, but that laugh died the moment she saw me sitting there, waiting. I must have looked like a ghost, because her face paled instantly. "What are you doing home, Jake?" she asked, nervously glancing back at the man who had just walked in behind her. I could feel my blood boiling as I stared at him. That's when it all clicked. "Tell him he gave you an STD, I spat, my voice laced with venom. Emily's eyes widened, and the guy standing behind her looked like a deer caught in headlights. It was pathetic. I was losing it. The thought of this man, in my house, with my wife, made me feel like I could explode. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't keep my voice steady. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice rising in pitch. "You," I shouted, unable to control my rage any longer. "You gave me an STD. I had to go to the doctor today because I was in so much pain I couldn't even stay at work. And it's because of you, and that piece of trash behind you." I was yelling now, feeling my face flush with heat. Her tears started almost immediately, as if she had just realized the gravity of the situation. "Jake, please, Let me explain, she sobbed. Explain. Explain. I barked. There's nothing you can say to make this better. You betrayed me. You gave me a disease. And for what? Some cheap fling. My words were coming out in bursts of anger, and I could barely control myself. Her lover didn't even try to defend himself. He turned, without a word, and practically ran out the door, not bothering to look back. I watched him go, and for a second, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction watching him flee. Good riddance. I'm sorry, Jake, I swear I didn't know, Emily started, but I cut her off. I don't care what you knew or didn't know, I snapped. Get out. Both of you need to get to a doctor and get checked, and I don't want to hear any more excuses from you. Just leave. She stood there for a moment, her eyes pleading with me, but I was done. Completely done. Finally, she grabbed her purse and left, and I was left sitting there, alone again. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm when you're too numb to care anymore. I sat back down in my chair, feeling utterly drained. In just one day, my entire world had been shattered. The woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with had ripped it all apart. And what for? A moment of excitement. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. I didn't know how I'd face the kids when they came home, or what I'd even say to them. When the kids came home that evening, it was as if the weight of the world had dropped on me again. I sat there, still in my work clothes, half dazed from the events of the day. My oldest, Ava, was the first to notice something was off. She was almost 17 now, sharp as ever, and I could see the worry in her eyes as she walked into the living room. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with concern. Ethan and Mia followed her into the room. Ethan was 14, a typical teenage boy, full of energy but clueless to the tension in the air. Little Mia, only 9, was the baby of the family. Her eyes darted between me and her siblings, sensing something wrong but not understanding what. "I'm fine," I lied, trying to muster some semblance of normalcy. "Just a rough day at work, that's all. Your mom had to run an errand and should be back soon." Ava wasn't buying it, though. She sat down next to me on the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning my face. "You've been drinking," she pointed out. "You never drink, Dad. What's really going on?" I could feel my throat tighten. I didn't want to do this, not now, not ever, really. But Ava was old enough to know the truth, or at least part of it. "Your mom, she's not feeling well," I said, trying to find the right words. "She had to go see a doctor today, and, well, I think she's been keeping some things from us." "What kind of things?" Ava asked, her voice barely a whisper, but her gaze was steady, almost like she already knew. I sighed, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "I think your mom hasn't been faithful. And now it's affecting me, too." Ava's face fell. She looked away for a moment, and then I noticed something I hadn't expected, tears forming in her eyes. "I should have told you, Dad," she whispered, so softly I almost didn't catch it. "I saw her last month with some guy. I thought it was just a one-time thing." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, shocked, trying to process what she was saying. "You knew." "I came home early that day," Ava continued, her voice shaking. "School was cancelled because of the snow, and when I got home, I heard noises from the guest bedroom. I didn't want to believe it, but when I peeked in, she was there with him. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I'm so sorry." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I pulled her close, holding her as she cried, and I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sorrow, relief, because at least now I knew it wasn't all in my head. Emily had been unfaithful, and it wasn't just some fluke. She had crossed a line I never thought she'd cross. "It's not your fault, Ava," I whispered, stroking her hair. "You didn't do anything wrong." For a long time, we sat there like that, just the two of us. When she finally pulled away, she looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and asked, "What's going to happen now?" I didn't have an answer for her. "I don't know," I admitted. "I really don't. But whatever happens, we're going to get through this, okay? All of us." She nodded, wiping her tears away. "I'm here for you, Dad," she said, her voice stronger now. "Whatever you need." "Thank you," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Later that evening, after Ava went to check on Ethan and Mia, I sat alone in the house, wondering what the hell I was going to do. My marriage, my family, everything was in ruins. And I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The house was eerily quiet after the kids went to their rooms. I sat there, staring into the darkness, wondering how things had spiraled so far out of control. I had no idea how to deal with this mess or how to even start fixing it. Every part of me wanted to go back in time, to a place where Emily and I were happy, where our family was intact. But that wasn't possible, not anymore. A little while later, I heard the familiar sound of Emily's car pulling into the driveway. My stomach clenched, and I could feel the anger boiling up again. How was I supposed to even talk to her? What could she possibly say that would make this any better? She walked in, her footsteps hesitant as she made her way toward the kitchen. "Jake," she called out, her voice shaky. "Are you here?" I didn't respond at first, but I could hear her coming closer, her footsteps soft, almost like she didn't want to face me. Finally, she entered the living room and froze when she saw me sitting there. The guilt was written all over her face. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, and she looked as though she hadn't slept in days. It was clear that she knew the gravity of what she had done. "I went to the doctor," she said quietly, her hands trembling as she fumbled with her car keys. "It's true. I have an STD. I'm so sorry, Jake. I never meant for any of this to happen." I just stared at her, numb. I didn't know what to say. How do you respond to something like that? An apology wasn't going to undo the betrayal, it wasn't going to erase the disease she had given me, and it sure as hell wasn't going to make our marriage whole again. "I don't want to hear it, Emily," I finally said, my voice cold. "I really don't care how sorry you are. You did this. You destroyed our family." Tears began streaming down her face as she sank into a chair across from me. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. I felt so alone, and—" "I don't want to hear your excuses," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I don't care why you did it. You slept with someone else. You gave me an STD. And now, our kids are caught in the middle of this mess. I don't know how I'm supposed to look them in the eye and explain what's going on." She sobbed quietly, but I felt no sympathy for her. Not anymore. The anger that had been building inside me all day finally broke through. "You can sleep in the guest room from now on," I said sharply. "I don't want you anywhere near me." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "Jake, please." I said no. I snapped, standing up and pointing toward the hallway. "Go to the guest room. Get your things. I don't want to see you tonight. I don't even want to think about you right now." She looked devastated, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Without another word, she got up and slowly walked toward the guest bedroom, her sobs echoing through the house as she gathered her belongings. I listened to her move around the room, the sound of drawers opening and closing, clothes being tossed into bags. It was almost surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. When the noise finally stopped and the house fell silent again, I went into the bedroom I used to share with her. The closet was half empty, her clothes gone. Her side of the bed was neatly made, like she hadn't been there in weeks. I stood there, staring at the emptiness of the room, and realized just how broken everything had become. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but eventually, I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come, and I didn't expect it to. My mind was racing, replaying the past 12 years over and over. How had we ended up here? What went so wrong that she felt the need to cheat? I couldn't understand it, no matter how hard I tried. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute. I needed to take control of the situation. I couldn't let this destroy me. I showered, got dressed, and left for work before anyone else was awake. I needed time away from the house, away from her. When I got to the office, I was the first one there, the silence giving me space to think. I sat at my desk, staring at the paperwork in front of me, but my mind was elsewhere. I wasn't ready to face the mess waiting for me at home, but I knew I had no choice. Somehow, I had to figure out how to move forward, how to protect the kids from this nightmare. I made a few phone calls and arranged for some time off. I didn't know what I was going to do with that time, but I needed space. Space to think. Space to breathe. When I finally left the office, I headed back home, feeling a pit of dread in my stomach. I knew Emily would be there, and I wasn't ready to deal with her, but I had to. This was my life now. This was my reality. When I walked through the door, she was sitting in the living room, her face red and blotchy from crying. Used tissues were scattered around her on the couch. She looked up at me, her eyes full of guilt and sadness, but I couldn't bring myself to feel anything for her anymore. "Jake, where do we go from here?" she asked quietly. "I know I've messed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but is there any chance we can fix this?" I stared at her, my heart heavy. "I don't know, Emily. I really don't know." Emily sat there across from me, her eyes pleading for a second chance. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't the same man anymore. Not after what she'd done. The anger had burned through me, leaving behind this dull, empty feeling. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, or if I even wanted to try. "Jake, I know I messed up, but I never stopped loving you," she said, her voice trembling. "I was lonely. I felt like we were drifting apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. That's why it happened. I didn't plan it, I swear. It just happened." Her excuses made me sick. "You're telling me you didn't plan it? That you just accidentally fell into bed with someone else?" I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. She shook her head, tears welling up again. "It wasn't like that. It wasn't multiple guys. There was just Alex. It started with him. He made me feel special again, made me feel beautiful. And after that, well, I made more mistakes. I got lost in it. I can't explain it, but it made me feel alive for the first time in years." My stomach churned as she spoke. "So, you felt alive by betraying me? By destroying everything we built together? I know it sounds terrible, but it wasn't about you, Jake. It was about me. I felt old, invisible, and—" "Spare me your sob story," I snapped. "You didn't feel invisible when we were raising our kids together, did you? Or when we built this life from the ground up? You think I don't feel tired? You think I don't feel like I'm aging? But I never went looking for something on the side, Emily. You could have talked to me. You could have said something, anything, before it got to this." Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands. "I'm so sorry. I know I've ruined everything." I stood there, watching her fall apart, and I didn't feel any sympathy. I wasn't sure I felt anything at all. "It's too late, Emily," I said, my voice flat. "Too late for sorry. You made your choice when you went behind my back. What did you expect would happen? That I'd just forgive you and pretend like nothing happened?" She lifted her head, her eyes desperate. "I don't know. I just want a chance to make it right. I still love you, Jake. I swear I do." I shook my head slowly. "Love? That's not love, Emily. You don't love someone and then go sleep with someone else behind their back. That's not how it works." She tried to protest, but I was done. "I can't trust you anymore," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And without trust, there's no marriage. I can't live my life wondering if you'll do it again. I'd always be looking over my shoulder, doubting every word you said, every excuse you made." Emily began to sob harder, her shoulders shaking. "Please, Jake, just one more chance. I'll do anything. I'll never cheat again, I swear. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I could barely stand to look at her. All I saw when I looked at her now was the betrayal, the lies, the hurt. "No," I said, my voice cold. "I gave you 12 years of my life. 12 years of loyalty, of love. And you threw it away for some temporary excitement. That's on you, not me." Her sobs echoed through the room, but I was already walking away. "You can stay in the guest room for now," I said, without turning back. "But start looking for another place to live. This is over." I didn't wait for her response. I headed straight to my den, the one place in the house that still felt like mine. I closed the door behind me and collapsed into the chair at my desk. And for the first time since all of this had come to light, I broke down. I sobbed like a child, all the anger and pain finally hitting me in full force. How had my life come to this? How had the woman I loved more than anything become a stranger, someone I could barely stand to look at? I didn't know how to pick up the pieces of my shattered life, and I didn't know if I even had the strength to try. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. I hadn't slept much, and the little sleep I got was restless. But I knew I had to keep moving. I had the kids to think about. I had to make sure they were okay, even if everything else was falling apart. When I went downstairs, Emily was nowhere to be found. She must have left early, either to avoid me or because she couldn't stand the tension. Either way, I was relieved. I wasn't ready to face her again, not yet. The kids came down soon after, and I tried to put on a brave face. Ava, always perceptive, gave me a worried look, but I smiled at her and told her everything would be okay, even though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. After they left for school, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at my coffee cup, wondering what the hell I was going to do. Divorce seemed inevitable, but the thought of it made my chest tighten with fear. How would the kids handle it? How would I handle it? I wasn't sure I was ready for my entire life to change so drastically, but I also knew I couldn't stay in this marriage. Not after everything. That afternoon, I took a deep breath and made the first of many phone calls. I had to protect myself, protect my kids, and that meant figuring out what came next. It wasn't going to be easy, but there was no other way. The days after our confrontation blurred together. Emily kept her distance, and the kids seemed to pick up on the tension but didn't ask many questions. I was thankful for that. I spent those days making arrangements, meeting with a lawyer to figure out what my options were for divorce. It felt surreal, sitting in an office and talking about dividing up assets, deciding on custody arrangements. This wasn't how my life was supposed to go. By the time I told Emily I wanted a divorce, I think she had already accepted it. There were no arguments, no fights, just a quiet resignation on her part. She knew there was no coming back from what she had done. The divorce process itself moved quickly, surprisingly so. Maybe because neither of us had the energy to fight, or maybe because we both just wanted it over with. I got the house, the kids, and most of the savings. Emily didn't put up much of a fight. She took what was fair, and I didn't try to punish her more than what life had already thrown at her. I could have asked for more, but I was tired of the bitterness. I just wanted peace, for me and for the kids. Emily was allowed to see the kids a couple of weekends a month, but I could tell they didn't want to go. Ava, especially, had grown resentful toward her mother. She saw the betrayal firsthand, and as much as I tried to keep her out of it, she was too smart to be fooled. One night, not long after the divorce, Ava and I sat down together, just the two of us. She looked at me with such sadness in her eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "if it comes down to it, we want to stay with you. I don't want to go with Mom." I nodded, understanding the pain she must have felt. "You don't have to, sweetheart. I won't force you." From then on, things between Emily and the kids became strained. They resented her for what she did to me, and in a way, I resented her for forcing them to see the ugliness of it all. As time passed, Emily seemed to drift further and further from us. She didn't try to fight it, though. She just let herself slip away, as if she knew that was the price she had to pay. Life without Emily was strange at first. I had always imagined we'd grow old together, that we'd watch our kids grow up and leave the nest side by side. Now, it was just me, raising them alone. But I wasn't truly alone. Ava, Ethan, and Mia, they were my world, and I knew I had to stay strong for them. As the months passed, I slowly started to heal. I had moments of doubt, moments where I wondered if I'd made the right choice by divorcing Emily. But those moments were fleeting, and every time I looked at my kids, I knew I had done what was best for them, and for myself. About a year after the divorce, something unexpected happened. Ava, who had been trying to push me to date again, introduced me to someone. Her name was Laura, and she was a single mother who ran her own business. Ava had met her through a school event and thought we'd be a good match. I resisted at first, still wary of the idea of getting involved with someone new. But Ava was persistent, and eventually, I agreed to meet her. To my surprise, Laura and I hit it off right away. She was kind, funny, and incredibly understanding about everything I had been through. She had been through her own divorce, so she knew the pain that came with it. We took things slow, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of hope for the future. Laura became a big part of our lives, not just for me, but for the kids as well. She was patient, never pushing too hard, but always there when we needed her. Over time, we grew closer, and eventually, we started talking about a future together. I never thought I'd find someone I could trust again, but Laura proved me wrong. She showed me that love doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real. A year after we started dating, I proposed to Laura, and she said yes. We got married in a small, intimate ceremony with just close friends and family. Ava, Ethan, and Mia stood by my side, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt whole again. Emily, on the other hand, faded into the background of our lives. She still saw the kids occasionally, but her relationship with them never fully recovered. Ava, especially, kept her distance. I couldn't blame her for that. The betrayal was too deep. Years passed, and as I watched my children grow into incredible young adults, I realized something important. Life doesn't always go as planned. People make mistakes, sometimes unforgivable ones, but that doesn't mean your story ends there. You have to pick yourself up, keep moving forward, and find your own happiness, even when everything falls apart. Emily's betrayal broke me, but it didn't destroy me. It took time, but I rebuilt my life. And in the end, I found something better. A love that was stronger, more resilient. A family that stood by me through it all. And for that, I am grateful. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.